welcome to Project Wolf. Biology professor Dr. Michael Noonan has an interesting challenge for his students this year. As the director of the Canisius College Institute for the Study of Human-Animal Relations, he's going to ask his students to take on the challenging question of whether wolves should be allowed to reintroduce themselves into the state of Colorado. But first he has to recruit students, and he only wants the best of the best that his university has to offer. Dozens of students applied to participate, and Dr. Noonan put them through a rigorous selection process. This included group discussions that allowed him to assess each student's familiarity with wildlife and their readiness to take on social policy issues.
Confined space is really important to keep the naturalness.
The process also included problem-solving exercises to assess the applicant's creativity and the ability to work well as a team.
I want this really bad. I think that it would be such a great opportunity for my future career as well as just like an undergrad experience.
What I think I like most about this project is getting the chance to make some kind of positive impact for wolves and wildlife overall.
And it also included a rigorous stair climbing test to assess their abilities to handle the mountains that they will be encountering.
Honestly, I feel like it's like, hey, you got selected. I'd probably cry, but in like a good cry.
Finally, Dr. Noonan proudly introduced the 8 members of Project Wolf to one another.
It's wonderful to see you all together as one group. I wanted to let you know all together that you are the CAC Project Wolf team for this year, the 8 of you. How cool is that? You all saw how tough the competition was. There were lots of applicants, and the tryout, as you saw, was rough. But you're the 8 who made it, and I'm delighted to work with you. And what this means is we are going to Colorado very shortly, and right after that to Wyoming, with the intention to find and film wolves while we're out there. How cool is that?
Following that, a whirlwind pace ensued, and the seriousness with which the team members took on this challenge was obvious.
I've been thinking a lot about the endurance and the critical thinking that it's going to take to address some of these heavier, more challenging questions, especially with our unique approach coming as part of the CAC team. I think some of the people we're interviewing might have opposing views or ideas that are really going to be unique to our perspective. So I think that's going to be the main challenge going forward, is just coming into everything with an open mind.
The first person to challenge the students' perception on this issue was Mike Phillips of the Ted Turner Endangered Species Fund.
I was intrigued to participate and meet with y'all because of the question that you posed. I think it was, should wolves be allowed? And I thought, well, for heaven's sakes, of course. Indeed, I found the question to be arrogant, assuming that we have the right to decide what should or shouldn't be.
With this in mind, the students set out to learn more about this complex issue, starting with the positive effects that wolves can have on their ecosystems.
The wolves are an essential, integral component to ecosystem function. All of the pieces are essential. That's why I say wolves can't do it on their own. But unless you have that archstone, that keystone in the arch, the whole thing falls apart. And in Colorado, what we've seen is the degradation of our ecosystems because we don't have that integral component to initiate these cascades of effects that enhance ecosystem health, moderating elk populations, moderating deer populations, removing the diseased so that the populations of ungulates get healthier.
With wolves being absent for almost 70 years, elk have not acted like elk for a very long time. They act more like cattle, or they almost lawnmowers where they just eat grass, forbs, a lot of aspen and willow. And as a result, you don't have any of that regeneration occurring. And with wolves being back on the landscape, they'll cause elk to move a lot more. And because of that, you'll have this release of energy. So you'll have aspen, willow, cottonwood come back, which creates great habitat for species like songbirds or beaver. And so that it creates a lot better, healthier ecosystem overall.
Dr. Noonan had planned in advance to use Rocky Mountain National Park as a model ecosystem where many lessons could be taught.
You see how the vegetation here is down to a stub. It's almost impossible for an herbivore here to find anything left. Here's a little bit of green there, a little bit of a bud there, but practically nothing else. Actually, come down with me and look for yourself for something that would be even remotely appealing. This is what's called an exclosure, and it's the opposite of what we normally think of as an enclosure. An enclosure keeps things inside, like pets or children inside a yard, but an exclosure keeps animals out. Elk are unable to jump so high. Inside, the vegetation is not impacted by the herbivores, the elk and mule deer. So you see out there, this is classic elk habitat. I mean, all these grasses and these forbs and shrubs are all a food for elk, and they're subject to overly high elk population for decades. So guys, now that we're inside the exclosure, you are noticing a dramatic difference. So this is a stream bed. Now it's all frozen at the moment, but this is a stream, a major drainage stream for all of this valley. And so this is what an ecologist will call a riparian habitat, a streamside or riverside habitat. This is only 7 years, this exposure. The other one was 30 years. 7 years, and do you notice that outside, we examined the grass and it was down to a stub. But in here, this is grass that has not been touched by large ungulate herbivores for 7 years, and the difference is dramatic.
Wolves go and what they do is they help to call colonies of the weak and the ill. So we need to allow nature to be what it's supposed to do, and that's to establish balance. We need wolves to be there to help establish that balance, have healthy populations of elk, deer, ungulates, and then as we saw with Yellowstone, other things start to come back and reestablish with the riparian areas, the beavers and other things where we start to now have more diversity in the animals and in the plants.
The trophic cascade from the wolves coming back into Yellowstone is well documented. 25 years ago, you went into the Lamar Valley and the elk had ground it down to desert. There were no willows. There were no moose, because moose need willows. The banks of the river were eroding because there was nothing to hold them in place, because the overpopulation of elk was so intense that it was destroying the park.
When the snow is particularly thick, or when the vegetation is exceptionally thin, in the worst winters, the elk come and eat aspen bark. So all of these, this scarred area, you can see how high the elk can reach. But this area here is a bite of an elk. This area here is a bite of an elk, a bite. And a high population of elk means that aspen themselves have difficulty growing. They're constantly trying to come up, but those shoots are extremely edible. And now stop and think, where are the little aspen? Look upslope for yourself. Look at the medium-sized aspen or the small aspen. See any? No, there aren't any. There aren't any. So for aspen to continue to exist in this area, people argue something has to be done about the overpopulation of elk.
So when we were in Rocky Mountain National Park with Dr. Noonan, he was giving us lessons on aspen trees, and he was telling us about how they're superorganisms, and it was really, really interesting. And then when you look to the bottom of nearly every single aspen there, you could see that the bark was chewed away, and that was from elk grazing. And then he had us look around, and he pointed out that there were no juvenile aspens anywhere. When we went to an exclosure later, where aspens were contained within, you could see that there were a lot of young aspen, and it just went to show that aspen populations aren't thriving because of the overpopulation of elk. And he brought up the really interesting point of how do you decide what's more important? Some people want to see the elk, some people want to see the aspen. It seems that maybe a way that that could work is to reintroduce the wolf. If the wolf were to be reintroduced, it would bring down the amount of elk grazing on aspens, and then that would allow for the younger aspens to survive, and that would bring back a healthier population of aspen.
With the ecological consequences of the wolves being absent so obvious, the students were left to wonder how anyone in Colorado could oppose their recolonization.
So, if you believe that the conversation is due, if not overdue, because of widespread public support in this wonderful assemblage of public wildlands that support a most accommodating prey population, and a state that almost certainly has socio-political sensibilities that would favor restoration, why does the idea continue to lag? Why is the idea so controversial? I think the answer, and I've thought about this a lot, but I'm convinced the answer is because of the mythical wolf. The real wolf is very difficult to see through the fog of the myth. It confuses our sense of what is right and what is wrong. Unfortunately, the myth is as strong as it is wrong. The myth would have you believe that wolves represent a threat to human safety, that wolves represent a threat to the big game industry, that wolves represent a threat to the livestock industry. None of those things are true, but the myth is oh so very powerful.
The biggest myths pertaining to wolves are that they're spreading disease, that they sport hunt and they sport kill, so they'll kill prey and they won't eat it, that they compete with the hunters for game, and this is all coming from, starting with Little Red Riding Hood and, all the myths, the wolves being cast as devils. And I think it just goes back to some, visceral fear that exists with wolves that doesn't exist with any other animal.
In 2014, for example, I think it was about 144 cows were taken by wolves in all the state of Montana. Over 20,000 died from bad weather. But that's not what they want to talk about. They want to talk about the 144.
So really what you have to do is you've got to convince ranchers and farmers and the people who are against the reintroduction that the effects will not be as bad. I mean, I can understand why they're concerned on the one hand, but the damage wolves do is not even close to being in the ballpark of the damage for which they're blamed, if you will.
And so, because I am working with a community conservation outfit, I see things from a socially constructed viewpoint. And so we have to meet people where they are and figure out, how can we empower them? How can we influence them? What we're trying to do is advance coexistence, okay? And so we believe you can live with large carnivores safely.
However, this belief is not shared by all. The students set off to meet with advocates who see things from a different perspective.
Yeah, I don't believe total coexistence is possible. There's just too many variables that you cannot control.
Our ancestors, a century and more ago, realized that you can't manage wolves like other predators. Our ancestors didn't completely exterminate wolves just out of pure malice. They did it because they realized that there's no such thing as, let's just have a few wolves around. Because even if you have a few wolves, very soon you will have too many wolves.
In my estimation, the advance of wolves into Colorado is much greater already than they care to admit or know about. So the repopulation, as soon as it starts to really wind up and kick out, is going to be rather quick, all by itself. So we are getting a reinvasion of all the places historically these species have been killed out or trapped out.
The reason that wolves are unique and different from other keystone predators is that wolves, mountain lions, and grizzlies are all killing machines. But the wolf, in addition to being a killing machine, is also a breeding machine and a survival machine. Wolves have multiple broods of pups each year, unlike mountain lions and grizzlies, and wolves have 6 or 7 pups in each brood. And so, for instance, in Alaska, studies have been done during periods of time when wolves were aggressively hunted. Wolves still showed a population increase of 34% per year. That means 1,000% population increase within 8 years. Man must be an integral part of managing wolf populations. Man, and I mean man in terms of sportsmen hunting, trapping, and even government agencies in many cases having to aggressively harvest wolf packs, etc., to keep the wolf population from mushrooming.
You need to note that the species still remains fully endangered under federal law in Colorado. As long as that applies, any naturally occurring wolf that shows up in Colorado cannot be managed at all. The term take is defined so prohibitively by the Endangered Species Act that there's not much you can do to an endangered animal without violating federal law. About the only thing you could get away with would be saying, Judge, I had to kill that gray wolf because my life was threatened. Other than that, your management hands are tied. So I say to Coloradans, many will say, well, wolves are coming. Wolves are coming, and they're going to get here. Mike, just be patient. I said, well, if that's the case, and you're okay with that, why in the world would you wait? If you wait, you have no management options whatsoever because they're fully endangered. In contrast, if you take the bull by the horns and you advance translocations and reintroductions, under federal and state law, you could build out a very accommodating management scheme to make sure that you were as respectful of the needs and concerns of your citizens as you possibly could be.
We have to get ahead of the curve as much as possible to teach people how to live with these animals that they haven't lived with for a long time. You know, some hunters feel that wolves compete with them for their game. But you know, many don't. And in fact, many hunters feel that having wolves around makes them better hunters because the prey species is moving around a lot more. Ranchers in particular have to be included in this discussion. Wolves kill and eat livestock. They can bother livestock. You know, there is some evidence that they may affect the weight of livestock, and of course weight is important to livestock. So there are different impacts that can occur, but there are changes that ranchers can make to accommodate wolves, for example.
We have a very good history of non-lethal methods that cowboys and wool growers use to keep predators out of their livestock, including guard dogs, which are good and necessary, and there'll be more and more uses when the wolves expand more and more into the ranges. Fencing, lighting, repellent noises, propane cannons that go off periodically, and responses to wolves when they see them before they get the livestock, and then try hazing them or scaring them away. So there's lots of different things that are already being used and will be kicked in when they're necessary.
It was clear that above all else, the Yellowstone Project made it obvious that all the gray wolf required was a willingness on our part to choose that it have a future and then make modest accommodations to ensure that future. We made a choice.
This trip is making it so obvious to me that so much of it is about human behavior and understanding humans and why we do what we do and why
some of us can see the intrinsic value of animals and of nature and others can't, and how we can I don't even know, bridge that gap. And I don't have the answer. I will hopefully not spend my whole life searching for it, but I will spend my life working to bridge that gap, because I think it is so important that we can instill the intrinsic value or enlighten people to see that intrinsic value that we see. But it's also more complicated than that, and it takes understanding people and listening to people and to hearing people out and understanding why they're doing what they're doing, why they're killing. It's so important to not just be angry, to not just be part of the anger, but to be part of the move for change. And to use the word love, I mean, just to be part of the love. Like it's a love of nature. It really is. It's a love for all life. And it has to start with a love for all human life and a love for an understanding of all our brothers and sisters before we can ever expect to see any change anywhere else.
If I was advocating for like environmental change and just like change in the world, I would be able to stop like the animals that are being hurt. So I wouldn't be helping the animals that were hurt because of us. I'd be stopping the animals that would be in the future hurt. And I think that is where my passion is, and that's what I need to go with. And I don't know how this trip did it for me, but I'm all in, and I don't know where I'm gonna go, but I'm very excited for it.
If I can relay the love of wolves and the love of, just seeing a herd of bison freely roaming to inner city kids who don't know that experience, then I'll feel so fulfilled. It's really great.
So I think a path forward is really education. Being nice, never getting upset with people, just pick your battles, and if you realize you're up against a brick wall, just say thank you, we can agree to disagree.
But it's important to remember that it's not going to be just one wolf in 1 year that restores our ecosystems in Colorado. It's going to take a robust population that is here for a sufficient amount of time and is sufficiently distributed across the ecosystems on the West Slope to have that impact. So if we have a sufficient number of wolves in sufficient and adequate distribution over an adequate amount of time, we can see positive restoration of Colorado ecosystems.
It was then time for the students to experience the great Yellowstone ecosystems for themselves. There, they got to see a much more balanced ecology. Stable populations of ungulates, such as bighorn sheep, bison, and elk. Abundant vegetation throughout the area, including the willows that had been depleted in the riparian habitats of Colorado. Here, the riverbanks were stable, with healthy populations of waterfowl, and otters, and moose. And finally, they were able to directly observe wolves for themselves.
They are so beautiful. This is a dream come true. It's beyond a dream even. Oh my gosh. Shh. Listen.
But look, others are coming.
Others are coming! Oh look, they're getting together. I can see them touching noses. I'm actually getting chills. Oh, they're playing in the snow. Oh, can everyone see? Oh, it looks like a reunion of some sort. Right now. This is the best group hug ever.
Oh, they're moving.
And in the direction of where we saw the elk earlier.
Wouldn't that be something?
I just want to say that I think intrinsic value is underrated. Seeing a wolf for the first time, just like we said, this whole trip, there's truly no words. And I'm tearing up just talking about it because it's a wolf in the wild. There's just no words. I'm at a loss for words. It leaves me speechless because it's so grand, and we talk about it, and you can read about it in a textbook, but seeing 15 strong wolves together in one population, it's incredible. It's insane.
What I like about the wolves the most is we get to see a window to the way the world used to be. In this one place, this less than 1% of the land in the country, we can come back and see what our ancestors saw. And when you hear them howl, there's just something primordial about that, right? And the more urban we get, and the less connected to the natural world we get. John Muir was really the first guy who talked about, I need to go back to my roots, I need to go back to nature. And that's a voice that's slowly and in fits and starts been gaining steam over the last 140, 150 years. And you can come do that here in listening to the wolves.
Even though their field studies eventually did draw to a close, their mission was not yet complete. The team gathered to review all that they had learned and to formulate their own final stance on the issue. And then finally, they took on the task of spreading the story of the wolf to the next generation.
All right, so hello everyone. I'm here today as a representative of Canisius College Ambassadors for Conservation.
And the question I'm here to address today is, should wolves be allowed to reintroduce themselves into the state of Colorado?
It may surprise you to learn that wolves were once one of the most widespread large mammals in North America.
So what happened? Where did all of these wolves go? Well, when European settlers came in and they started to move out west, agriculture and ranching started to boom.
During these times, wolves were considered threats to domestic livestock and as competitors for wild prey such as elk and deer.
So the solution of Americans at this time was to create poison control systems and bounty systems that would eliminate wolves.
Even today, on one side of the philosophical debate, people would argue that wolves and humans are natural competitors. So it would be perfectly natural and allowable for one biological competitor to eliminate another.
It can be said that our predecessors got rid of wolves for good reasons, and that we should be grateful that they did so.
On the other side of the philosophical debate, ethicists would argue that such positions miss the point. They argue that wolves should be reestablished because it is the right thing to do. Wolves lived on this continent long before European settlers claimed it for themselves. They are complex and intelligent predators that deserve a place on this earth just as much as we do.
And on the practical side, if wolves were to be reestablished in Colorado, the effects would presumably parallel what we saw happen in Yellowstone, which would allow for healthy populations of hoofed animals to once again return, as well as vegetation and healthy populations of vegetation returning to this area.
If wolves were to be reintroduced into Colorado, will the process have consequences? Of course it will. As you have seen, there are experts who warn that adjustments will be necessary in the ranching industry. Changes will doubtless occur in the hunting and tourism sectors as well, with economic changes that will have to be addressed.
So as you can see, there are many factors that can influence one's opinion on this very controversial topic. So for a moment, I would like to role play and say that we are the people of Colorado. Do we want to hear the wolves howl once again in our state? Or would we much rather have our elected officials do everything in their power to keep wolves out of our area? So can anyone in favor of bringing the wolves back raise their hands?